Shawna and Jody here with Real Sisters, Real Talk.
We're glad to have you joining us as we talk about growing in our faith with God.
Hey, welcome to Real Sisters, Real Talk. I'm Shawna, and that is my sister Jody, and we are so thrilled to have you with us and just loving the interaction that we're having and the requests that we're getting for different topics to take on. We take those really seriously, and we're actually taking on a topic today that was recommended by you. So thank you for that. But I have to tell you, today is May 21st, and it's our other sister, Kelly's birthday today. So we have to say happy birthday to Kelly.
Yes. She is just a year older than I am, and it's fun to celebrate her at this time of year. Always right around Mother's Day, so super fun.
Love that girl. She's so feisty and she's tough, and we adore her. And there are a lot of ways that I am me today because of her, and so grateful for her.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to tell you, in regards to a few weeks ago, we had a Mother's Day episode. And you told the story, Jodes, about mom and camping. And if you didn't hear it, you just are going to have to go back to that episode and catch the whole story. But it was so funny. After that episode aired, I was talking with mom and she's like, I cannot believe you told that story on your podcast. I'm like, Mom, was it true? Was it accurate? She's like, yes. So it was funny.
Yep. Our mom is a hoot. She's fun. Full of energy.
She's a feisty one.
Yep, she is. And we're kind of in that window now between Mother's Day and Father's Day. We're turning that corner in a couple of weeks here. And so, yeah.
So with that in mind, one of the recommendations that we had, Jody, for taking on a subject for the podcast was talking about relationships with our parents as they're aging, as they're entering into the golden years. So that's what we're going to dive into today. How do we honor our parents? Because the Word of God does say that we are to honor our parents. And Exodus 20:12, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. So it's a commandment of the Lord, and we don't outgrow it. It doesn't expire when we move out of the house. It's a commandment that God intends for us to keep all throughout our lives. And I realize, can I just say really quick, this is going to look different for each of us because we have different stories about where we come from. And so honoring mom and dad is going to look different. So we're going to try to touch on those differences today, recognizing that you may have a real troubled relationship with your mom and your dad. And even that doesn't release you from God's command to honor your mom and your dad. So talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah. And I really love this topic. We're so glad that we got to get this request from one of our listeners. But honestly, the honoring our parents is a command, and so it's something that we live out all the way through our lives, but the way that we do that shifts in different seasons of our lives. And so even, I mean, Shawna, we're in that kind of in between thing, like we are also parenting adult children, so our relationship with them has shifted as well as they become adults. And the same thing is true with the way that we are daughters to our mom, and we're to our dad as well. And so I just like some of the things I think about as I think about that question is it's always my goal, even as roles change and shift a bit, it's always my goal to honor mom. And it always was to honor dad. They were always Johnny's parents too. They were always people that, we were really blessed. And so there were people we could go to for advice early in our marriage and things like that. And so things shifted. Like we lost our dad in January 1st of 2021. And the role as caregiver became part of my role. And so I'm going to go to an extreme here. So even because I live so close to them, there were times when, before we were able to get more care, like I would go in and I would have to help bathe dad, and I would have to, some of those things, there were seasons where I had to really step in to be caregiver. And there's ways you can even do that while still honoring them, because you never want to treat them. I never want to treat dad as though he was a nuisance or he was a toddler. he was my
Mhm.
dad. That never changed. And so I wanted to make sure that all the way through, I treated him with great respect and honor and still took care of him the way that he needed to be taken care of. And so, it's tricky in how to
Mhm.
navigate that role. And, yeah. And so, I mean, honestly, yesterday, Lauren and I got to have lunch with mom, and our Auntie Jean just moved into the Artesia Christian home in one of the nice apartments like mom's, just right above her, which is so much fun. But so we got to go bring lunch to both of them and have lunch in the garden. And I'm just I'm really grateful for this season and getting to spend this time with mom in that way. And then I'm going to pass it to you and let you kind of comment on that if there's anything, because then I would also like to talk about like what if what if that relationship is not rich and
Right.
full and things are shifting and we're having to navigate either just having any kind of relationship with our parents or as a caretaker in a difficult relationship. That's a whole nother
Yeah.
thing. So, but any
Yeah.
thoughts on
Well, we
that
both
first?
had the privilege of really loving mom and dad and being loved on them really well. And honestly, that is a huge leg up on honoring your mom and your dad. When you have that as a basis of relationship, it is. But our relationship with mom and dad has been different, Jodes, because as in most of my adult life, I have lived out of state. So yeah, it was 23 when I left California and have lived out of state ever since. So one of the ways I think I've got kind of some bullet points here of specific ways that we can honor our mom and our dad, and one of them is spending time with them. And that looks different. I don't get to go bring lunch and sit in the garden and have lunch with mom and Auntie Jean, but I have a practice of I've got about a 50-minute commute on from home from the station, and we're 3 hours ahead because I'm on Eastern time. But I have a habit of calling mom on my drive home. And it's not every day. And, you don't get any bonus points or stars, but I just want to be a regular part of her life. And I want to
Yeah.
know what's going on in the day to day. It's different, when you touch base regularly versus, I don't know. I'm not throwing any shade if that's not your rhythm, but spending time with mom has been a priority for me. And that's just one way that I can do it.
Right. And so you have to be creative. So it's not one way is right and another way is wrong, is what works in the situation we're in so that we can actually be in relationship with our parents, because that's actually a really important piece. So, yeah. And I know mom loves hearing what's going on in your life. That's often how I get to hear too, of little things that maybe I hadn't heard from you yet. But also, for her to have a chance to tell you about what's going on there, what games she's playing and winning and all that stuff too. So
and winning and winning and
she's a
winning.
lucky
Like,
lady,
mom,
man.
mom, you gotta let the other people win once in a while because they're gonna not want to play with you if you if you're always winning. But she's a winner.
Yeah, that used to always make dad so mad. She
I
wins all the
know.
time, just a lucky person. So yeah, but how do we honor our parents if that relationship is strained?
Hmm.
um, there might be some hurt that we're carrying from that relationship, from our childhood or even early adulthood. There might be some unhealth in that relationship. And so, how do we honor our parents in that process? And I think one of the things I just think is so important is that, well, I'm going to start with we actually need to learn to forgive, and forgiveness does not mean allowing that person to injure us in the same way again. Forgiving is a thing that we do between us and the Lord, and it's getting our heart right, and it's surrendering that person into the Lord's hands, and then we can enter into that relationship with healthy boundaries. And so I think that's key in a relationship that is difficult. There's some brokenness and some woundedness, is that we actually can create some healthy boundaries so that they aren't able to just repeat the same hurtful patterns over and over again. And I think that's good and right and
Yeah.
healthy.
I think too, a lot of times when it comes to forgiveness, for me personally, I have a strong desire for the person who has done ill against me to want to be forgiven. And that may never happen. There you might be in a relationship with your mom or with your dad where there have been wrongs done to you that they are not going to feel remorse about, or come clean with you about, or apologize for. And your forgiving them doesn't hang on their desire to be forgiven. It's how God has called us to live, and it's not because they deserve it. It's because we have been forgiven so much that we are able to forgive other people. So yeah, we're actually off the hook for waiting on our mom or our dad to say, "I'm sorry that I did this to you." We don't have to wait for that. We can step into everything that God has for us, um, on on our initiative, because God calls us to it. So, yeah, that's such a good word, Jodes, is forgiveness, and understanding that forgiveness is usually not a one and done. It's usually not just a one time, like, I forgave you once and so now you're forgiven. The actions that they're committing against you might continue to require you to forgive them again and again and again.
Yeah. And that can be really difficult. And yet it's what we're called to do. So, yeah, just
That's a big
a
one.
yeah. What else is on your list?
One of the ways I think that we can honor our parents, and actually this is one of my absolute favorites. This is easy for me, but it's hearing their stories.
I love
I
that.
love I do too. I love hearing stories from mom and dad, and I know when dad was still with us, he's in heaven now, but there was one time that I was staying at their house, I'd come to California, and we were at breakfast, and dad was wearing his white undershirt, V-neck men's undershirt, and his sweatpants, his slick sweatpants, and he's at the table for breakfast, and I just started asking him questions, and I pulled out my phone and I videotaped it. And I was like, "Dad, tell me about, your childhood," or whatever the case may be. And it's like, those are precious things to have now. And with mom, I'll occasionally, remember something from my childhood and say, I never heard that. I never heard about that from your perspective as an adult. Tell me about that. Or what was this like for you? And so, yeah, we can honor our mom and our dad by being inquisitive and hearing their stories.
I love what you just said, Shauna, because honestly, our perspective is all we know. And so we kind of write in the other person's perspective. Like I do that with my kids a lot. I love to hear their version of that memory. What like when we sit around the table and stories start being told, I love to hear what their perspective is. But that's true for us with our parents too. What a great way to find out like what and as a kid, we have a filter, probably limited filter in how we take in that information. And so really good to get that insight. And the truth is like, you recording dad that day, like when we lose that loved one, those stories are gone. And so we
Mm-hmm.
need to value our parents and those stories now so that we can actually hear those stories and learn
Carry
more
them on.
about them. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and like tell our kids.
Yes. I remember when, Johnny's parents are both gone now, and when many, many years ago, they took us to the Netherlands because that's where they met and were married, and then they immigrated shortly after they were married and to the United States, and I remember when we were in the Netherlands is when I could get them to really talk. So I would ask
Mm.
they lived there in captivity when back in the World War II. And so we would get to ask questions and they would tell stories that we could never get them to tell at home because we would maybe go into a town and that would trigger some of those memories as they saw those locations. And so just take advantage of those opportunities to hear their stories. And then, like you said, tell our kids because otherwise that's lost with us. And so we want to make
Mhm.
sure we pass those stories on. But yeah, it's fun to be able to record those.
And if the relationship is a strained relationship, it might actually give you some insight into some of the difficult parts of your relationship if they open up their story and share with you a little bit.
Right.
Another way that we can honor mom and dad is to speak well of them. Speak
Oh,
well of them when they're not, speak well of them to their face, but speak well of them when they're not around.
that's a good word. Yeah. And I think that's a good word for everybody, especially if you have a strained relationship. We don't have to tear them down every time they're not in the room. Um, but that's a really good word. I know, like with dad, his health really took a lot from him at the end, and it was difficult. We saw a dad that we didn't know before that. Our dad was always very just gentle, and he had just a little bit of an edge, still so loving and kind, but there was stuff going on. Part of his brain was not functioning properly, and so we just saw a different side, and it's important not to, yeah, even in that scenario, in end of life, not to talk poorly about them. But also in a strained relationship, that is gossip, and we need to not be doing that.
Yeah, and you know what? This applies to every single one of these things, Jodes. But I always think too, the way that we speak of our parents, we're modeling for our children how we
Yeah.
want to be treated when that time comes for us, and the things that
Amen.
our parents are struggling with now. Right? Like I want my kids to honor me when I'm my functions are not what they were in my youth or whatever the case may be. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind.
That's true of every relationship, isn't it? Can we just
Yeah.
speak kindly of people? That's a really good word. So I'm sorry. What's the next one?
Yeah, no, 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 it's good. Pray for them. Pray
Ah,
for them and pray with them.
yes, I love that.
Yeah. I've had moments with mom where, because every day I ask, how are you feeling? Like, how are you doing? And there might be a day where something's not feeling so great. Like, oh, my feet hurt today, or my back is hurting today, or whatever. And I'll just say, well, can I pray? Can I pray with you? Can I pray for you? And we'll just pray on the phone. I'm driving home from work. I'm in Michigan. She's in California, but we pray together on the phone. And it's a special thing to be able to do that together in your relationship.
Absolutely. And it just reminds me, we had a couple of kind of big doctor appointments and procedures with mom shortly after dad passed, and just that privilege of being the one who drove her, and being in the car with her, and being able to take her hand, and we'll pray before we go in, because you know what, there's some fear around this,
Hmm.
and so we can pray because that brings peace. And so what a beautiful thing. If you don't have that relationship with your parents, if that's not something that would be received, or something, like if it's just that it's awkward, I would say go do it. Pray with your
Yep.
parents. If it's something that would not be received, pray for them. Pray for them. And honestly, one of the beautiful things of when we pray for somebody is it changes our hearts. And we can pray that God would touch them and meet them right where they're at. But what a beautiful gift to pray for our parents.
Hmm. That's good. All right, another thing that we can do is live at peace with them.
Mm.
The word of God says, as far as it depends on you. And maybe that's like you can just pass right by that one because that's easy for you to do that. But if your relationship is strained, and can I just say, I realize that Jodes and I have a limited perspective in speaking into this conversation. We're not, unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, able to speak to all the difficulties of having a strained relationship with mom and dad, but doing the best that we can to share with you ways in which we can honor mom and dad, whether your relationship was good or whether your relationship was challenging. But one of them being, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with mom and dad.
Yeah. And that might look like, if there's certain things that are trigger topics, you just uh, don't bring that up for no reason. If there is an issue that needs to be dealt with, a conversation that needs to be had, then enter into that with grace and love and truth, with the desire of reconciliation. Like that's different. And I don't know. I just feel like I need to say again, if there's been hurt, uh, if you've been a victim of abuse from a parent, this honoring our parents does not mean allowing or pretending that away. Okay. It does not mean pretending that away and having to put on a brave face and act like it never happened. That's not honoring our parents, but honoring them is being able to be respectful in an appropriate way for that relationship. And I think that includes even just the last one, this one you said before, this one is, don't talk ill of them. maybe that is included in that, and praying for them. But
Mhm.
yeah, again, we recognize this is hard in some scenarios.
Yeah. Another thing we can do with mom and dad to honor them well is to ask for their advice.
Yep.
You might not need it and you might not even want it, but mom and dad have got something to offer you. And it means a lot, I think, when we ask for their advice. I was with some friends last week. I was in Orlando for work, and a colleague of mine, he's in his 60s, and he was sharing that he went to his dad's house and he was helping him with something because it was something that had to do with a roof and it required a ladder, and his dad was going to do it. And he was like, no. So you're not climbing that ladder. So he goes over there and he climbs up the ladder. He gets to the top and he's doing what he needs to do. I don't even know, with the siding on the house or whatever. And his dad is giving him instructions on how to do it from the ground. He's like, I'm in my 60s. I don't need my dad telling me how to do A and B, right? And whatever. But he said I wanted to honor him. And so I was like, okay, dad, and just, all right, I'll try a little bit harder. I'll kind of try to do it your way, dad. But it's kind of funny. But yeah, but we can honor mom and dad in that way by still receiving or even asking for their advice at times.
Yeah, that is a good word. I mean, Johnny and I have gone to mom and dad and his parents for advice so many times over the years, just even as we process through things. Our son was just and daughter-in-law were just making a big decision, and they processed that with us, and we love that. That's such a beautiful thing to be able to have that relationship with them. But in light of what you just story you just shared, it reminded me. Um, I would drive dad to his doctor appointments, and mom would come along too, but I would drive them. And so dad in, his 80s, and he hadn't driven for years, and was really slowing down. Um, but he always wanted to tell me what lane to be in, where to turn,
Oh.
what to like. He wanted to, and yeah, there was many times I would just do what he said. I'm like, he wants me in that lane, I'll go in that lane. Who cares? I don't care. I can drive in
Right.
the lane. And sometimes there, a couple times it would be the wrong directions, and I would just take his hand and say, "You know what, Dad? I got it today. I
Mhm.
I'm gonna get us there. I promise you, I'm gonna get us there."
Trust me,
But
dad. I got this.
yeah, but it just kind of cracked me up. It was in driving he wanted to give me advice, which was great. He taught
That's
me to
good.
drive, so he taught you to drive too, didn't
There
he?
you go. Yeah, he
Yeah.
did. Oh my gosh, that's a funny story. Okay, so we had a big white pickup truck that I think
Mm.
we all had to drive for the first year that we had our license. Yes?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And Dawn had to
So
drive with a camper on. Boy, would she tell you that. So
okay, so big white pickup truck, and I was learning to drive. Dad was teaching me to drive, and we were not in a parking lot. We were on a street in Artesia, and I think it was my first time behind the wheel. Anyway, we were between the gas station and our house. You know what I'm talking about,
yes.
on like whatever Jersey or whatever.
Yeah.
And anyway, I somebody started to cross the street in front of us, and I got the gas and the brake confused, and I like gunned it as they stepped out in front of the street.
Oh no.
Yeah, that was scary. I just about gave dad a heart attack that day, I think. So we made it. Everybody was fine. But
Good.
yeah, dad did teach me how to drive.
Yeah, I have a dad story too. Dad worked in Burbank. We lived in south of LA, like South LA County. And so he had a long commute on the freeway every day. And he was an aggressive driver. He just was. Like, he was on the road a lot, and that was just the truth. And he taught each one of us how to drive. And so I remember I'd just gotten my permit and I wanted to drive as much as I could. And so there was a night Kelly had been at a school dance or something. And so we had to go pick her up like at, I don't know, 10 o'clock at night or something. And so I said, Dad, can I drive? I always wanted to go along and drive. So can I drive? And he says, yeah, come along. So I'm driving, and he taught us how to drive. I don't know which car he taught, but he taught Kelly and I to drive in a stick shift because he wanted us to learn how
Oh,
to drive stick shift. So I took my driver's license test in a stick shift car. But anyway, so I was driving, and this bus was about to pull into my lane. So I slowed down. And he goes, step on the gas, step on the gas, step on the gas. And I remember I got so mad at him. I said, you can drive however you want to drive when you are driving, but don't make me get aggressive with other cars. I was so upset.
why did he want you to step on the gas? Because you didn't want
He
you to
did,
be behind the bus.
He didn't want the bus to cut me off. He just didn't. He just thought the bus should not be in front of me. It should be behind me. I'm like,
Oh
Dad,
my.
Dad, Dad. So anyway,
Mm-mm.
that's my memory of learning to drive with Dad.
Wow.
So
Yeah. Oh, so fun. Okay, last one. The last one
yep.
that I had on my list anyway, ways to honor mom and dad. Oh, by the way, I did want to share this quote really quick and then I'll go into the last one. It's Timothy Keller and he says, "It's respect for your parents that is the basis for every other kind of respect and every other kind of authority." So there is something to the way that we respect our mom and dad that teaches us and bleeds over into every other area of life and how we are going to respond to authority in our lives. But the last one is bless them. Bless mom and dad.
Yeah.
And that you can get all kinds of creative on how you want to bless mom and dad. Bless them with gifts, bless them with your time and your presence, with your attention. You probably know what would mean the most to your mom and dad. Bless them.
I love that. And with that, I think another way is just to thank them. To thank them for there's things we can thank them for providing for us. Um I
For giving
for
us life.
Right? Yeah. For our mom and dad, man, mom, thank you for raising us in the faith. Thank you for modeling that out to us. Thank you for showing us what it means to live for the Lord. Thank you for providing a house that was stable, a home, that was safe. There's so many things that we can be thankful for. And if your story's hard, there's simple things that we can be thankful for. And so, yeah, that's a really good word. So, this is just that season between Mother's Day and Father's Day. We thought this was a good topic that was sent in by one of our listeners, um and we recognize relationships are all different. And so that is part of navigating how to do this. But as Shauna read in Exodus 20:12, we are commanded to honor our mother and father. And so um, we want to do that well in a way that is very appropriate for the relationship that we have. And we want to extend the love and grace of God to them, just as Jesus died for us on the cross, right? And so we want to encourage you to reach out to your mom and dad, thank them, encourage them, bless them in whatever way you can. And as you do that, remember, we serve a real God and he really loves you.